It's precisely with the person close to you that, in a way, the gap between any two human consciousnesses becomes most apparent.
Dostoevsky and Nietzsche both regarded the creeping nihilism and meaninglessness of their time as a fundamental threat to humanity. While both were critical of modernity and rationalism, their solutions were radically opposed. Dostoevsky looked towards transcendence for an answer and found in love and compassion the chief law of human existence, while Nietzsche declared God dead and found meaning in human nature and the assertion of human creativity. Is Dostoevsky, as some have argued, a denial of all that is human and an acceptance of authority and oppression? Or is it Nietzsche who is most dangerous in his endorsement of human desire and the will to power? Can meaning only be found outside of ourselves, in the love of others and in God's love for us? Or should we follow Nietzsche and see human will and desire as the means to create meaning? We have a fantastic panel view today. Oliver Ready is a celebrated translator and literary scholar. His translation of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment has received critical acclaim. Ready teaches Russian literature and translation at St. Edmund's Hall, Oxford. Kathleen Higgins is a leading and wide-ranging philosopher at the University of Texas, Austin. Her specialities are broad and include the philosophy of aesthetics, emotion, and music. Author of many acclaimed books on Nietzsche, Janne Teller is a critically acclaimed writer whose novels include Odin's Island and Come, also Nothing, an existential novel about the question of nihilism, an award-winning book that has been translated into 36 languages. So we'll start with our opening question, and each speakers will give a 3-minute pitch. Is the answer to nihilism and meaninglessness in Nietzsche's vision of human nature, or is it in Dostoevsky's love and compassion? Kathleen, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I would say that certainly love provides meaning in life. Did Nietzsche think that? It depends on what you mean by love. I think he did think that the kinds of things that would provide meaning in life all involve love of some sort. But he was more skeptical about compassion, certainly as compassion was preached to people, as he thought love of neighbor, what he'd grown up with as the ideal, amounted to. The difficulty he saw with compassion is that it's a very receptive point of view. He was far from someone who didn't think that was good. In fact, he himself tried to analyze different kinds of characters in something like a literary way so that people would be able to empathize with them from their own point of view. And I think that is actually attempting to inspire compassion in his audience. But he tended to think that compassion as a project wouldn't work, partly because compassion as a project is so unsituated in general. It amounts to, from his point of view, something like, you go first, no you. There's not really any impetus behind it. Whereas I think he thought inevitably, given our willful natures, what was essential to finding meaning in a satisfactory way in our existence is going to be really throwing ourselves into some project. Even if that project is a kind of aspiration to be a certain kind of person, he thought that's the kind of thing that everybody actually benefits from, if only because people end up feeling a lot more embraced or a lot more supported by people who feel a certain kind of sense of themselves. So I think that Nietzsche has a point in all of these claims, and I'll probably say more about that as we go.
Thank you.
Right, so I think I've been set up here to represent Dostoevsky, which I'm, broadly speaking, happy to do. I'm not an uncritical admirer. So I think I'll begin just by trying to pin down this association of Dostoevsky with love and compassion. Many, I think, Russians would be surprised by that description. Tolstoy said after Dostoevsky's death that he was, quote, all struggle, always fighting with himself, and Tolstoy knew about that too. Many Ukrainians, and not just Ukrainians, would be, I think, seriously object to the idea of a loving, compassionate Dostoevsky. the man who, at the height of his fame and influence in the 1870s, wrote many articles dripping with hatred for other nations' faiths, other confessions, all in the name of supposedly Christian love that would be spearheaded by Russia as first among equals. And we see how that's playing out right now with the blessing of both Tsar and Patriarch. It's interesting that Nietzsche, who, as you say, rejects compassion, also rejected nationalism. Dostoevsky, whose novels abound in scenes of compassion, ends up embracing nationalism. That's the journalism. And if we turn to the novels, the fiction, which is what most of us will value Dostoevsky for, we see there that, like the journalism, the novels are also rooted in faith, in Christian faith, in questions of faith, but in a much more genuinely universal way that clearly has appealed to both believers and non-believers alike. He's inspired, evidently, by the imperative, which is not purely Christian, of course, but common to all religions, love your neighbor as yourself. But he probes it, and his novels ask, is it even possible to love your neighbor as yourself? Not just that, is it even possible to understand another person? In fact, in the Russian translation of the New Testament, neighbor comes out as the person close to you. And all of Dostoevsky's novels are based on, how you interact with the person close to you in your own room, the person in the room with you, in your own home, in your own marriage. Because it's precisely with the person close to you that, in a way, the gap between any two human consciousnesses becomes most apparent. And so, that we may not understand the person we live our life with or whatever. It can become a kind of abyss of meaninglessness. And that's the challenge that Dostoevsky faces and tries to confront as a novelist. How do you create meaning? By looking at this kind of very nuclear human interaction. How do you create meaningful dialogue? And here, again, we have the crucial contrast with Nietzsche, who rejects love of the neighbor, and instead, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathleen, promotes the idea of love of the distant. Yeah, we can explore this further, but the dividing line there is the question of compassion. But Dostoevsky's compassion is not perhaps what we would commonly understand by compassion, and I'd like to come back to that later to explore that.
Yes, if this was about science, we would be able to test who is right, Nietzsche or Dostoevsky. Unfortunately, it isn't like that. So as a novelist, I'll come in more like with a story, because I don't think any of them is right, nor are they totally wrong. But if we say, why are we here? Because you have to come back to that very basic question to even start thinking about who is more right. And nobody has that answer, why are we here? We don't know if there is a God, or which God it would be, or if there's none. We can only, when it comes down to it, believe. Even atheism is a form of belief. And when we can't know why we are here, yes, then you can say everything is meaningless. And I wrote in the book that questions, or that puts that question in the mouth of a 14-year-old boy, and his friends then sets out to prove to him life matters. Because he says things like, the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, and you live maximum to about 100. Life isn't worth the bother, and other similar things. And when you question life in that large perspective, it does become very meaningless to be a human being, here or at any time. And at the same time, the thing is, we do live in the here and now. We don't live in that large perspective. So one can also turn it around and say, in the here and now, everything matters. So I don't think it's a choice between love and compassion or just willful, powerful, and competition with your peers. We as human beings, yes, we are competitive and we fight, but we can make love and compassion give meaning. But the very existence, since we are born and we have this gift of life, it's pretty amazing actually. We can stretch and bend our hands, we can feel something. Even when we are sad or bored, it's quite fantastic. You can feel sad or bored. Where does it come from? And so we have this absolutely amazing gift of life, for a certain number of years. We have no clue where it comes from, but maybe that makes that gift so much more valuable. And then we can use that gift in many different ways to give it the meaning that we want our life to have. And there one can choose one or the other approach, but I believe life itself, simply since we have it, has a meaning.
Thank you. We're now really going to get to the heart of the debate, and I'm going to put this to Oliver first. Feel free to answer generally or on behalf of Dostoevsky, as you are the appointed spokesperson in this debate. Can meaning only be found outside of ourselves?
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.